Hello everyone, this is Debra Richardson, and today I am putting the AP in Happy where accounts payable teams are empowered to protect the vendor master file from fraud. This podcast will give a voice to accounts payable team members by talking about the growing reality of cyber attacks in their world and which vendor setup and vendor management techniques they can apply to protect the vendor master file from fraud. Need training? Visit the Vendor Process Training Center to enroll in your choice of weekly live and on-demand training sessions. Plus, get access to vendor setup form templates and reference tools that will help you and your team to reduce the potential for fraud, compliance fines, and just overall bad vendor data. So sign up for a free account to get access to free training sessions, vendor process FAQs, and a resource library with information you need to manage your vendor master file. Visit training.debrarrichardson.com today. The link will be in the show notes. What if you not only had a second set of eyes to review a vendor email to make sure there were no red flags when there's a request to change banking, but also to check for this new fraudster trend to pass your confirmation call? Keep listening. Welcome to episode 386. Use AI tools to detect red flags in emails requesting vendor bank changes. Now, I'll be the first to admit it's not just bank changes that fraudsters are after to try and divert your vendor's payments. It's also remittance addresses for check payments as well. So you can use this for any change requests. You can also use it, for that matter, for any request to add new vendors. Anytime you want to make sure that there are no red flags when you are going to update the vendor master file, you know what? You can use artificial intelligence or AI tools. And hopefully you have access to them. We know the fraudsters do. With their deep fake audio, deep fake images, deep fake video, with their emails that are written so that you can't tell that that it's fraudulent or phishing because there are no grammatical errors, no context errors. That day is just gone. If you find an email today that has a lot of grammatical errors in it, it was probably intentional so that they know who's going to fall for the next level of email that's coming. So anyway, the fraudsters have it. I hope you guys have it. I know that I have some AI tools, but because I am a Microsoft person, I definitely paid extra for Copilot. So I'll talk a lot. A lot of stuff I talk about today is available in Copilot, or I did it in Copilot, but it's also available in Gemini, ChatGPT. But you can't always use it the same way. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But anyway, last week's podcast episode 385, it talked about use and approval workflow for vendor record activity. And then I gave you some tips if it's not automated. Well, the purpose of that episode was, I was number one talking about a human reviewing the request. And that is based on trying to make sure that there's no payment fraud gets through, because you have a second set of eyes on the request. And what that approver is looking at is they're looking at what's entered on the vendor master file, making sure it was accurate and that it was processed, or the request was processed in accordance with stated procedures. And those procedures are put into place to make sure that you don't run into compliance fines, that you don't have fraud, and that you just don't have overall bad vendor data. And let me just say now that should absolutely still be done. And I don't know if I say it enough, but there is no one thing that is going to stop fraud because the fraudsters know what we are doing. And so there's no one control that's going to stop it. You have to layer controls, and so consider this an additional layer. And so, what am I just talking about? So, I'm talking about at the user level. And that is very important because I also just published a vendor master file tip of the week as of the recording of this podcast, and it is coming out on May 7th, 2026. I just published a vendor master file tip of the week on my YouTube channel that I will link below. All about email burnout because, email burnout may cause team members to miss those red flags because they are just skimming them too quickly. And email burnout is a thing, especially in accounts payable and the vendor setup and the vendor team, because we get so many emails. The volume is so high. And a great example of, having to check each email and be 100% to verify that it was valid and there are no red flags, just using that eagle eye, right? We've got some references that will tell us like 26 different points that we need to look at in an email. Imagine actually, I don't have to have you imagine that, those folks that are in the vendor setup and maintenance process and in accounts payable. But if you are a manager or director or a CEO or a CFO, I know some of you listen to this podcast and you have team members that are doing that every day for hundreds of emails a day. You can have some email burnout, right? And so I talked about in that video how you can, I think I had 3 steps that you could take to avoid it or to how to handle it. And this was when you're in a shared inbox situation, but it could still be, done if you have emails for vendor setup and AP invoices going to individual emails. I don't recommend that, but it was for a shared email environment. So again, I'm going to put a link to that in the show notes and you can check that out if you are interested. Okay, so what I'm talking about today is again at the user level, but you know what? This is back at step one. If this were put into place and that AI tool was able to identify red flags that then alerted the user or the team member that, you know what, this might be a fraud. Guess what? It may not even get that far, right, to have that request processed and that vendor added into the vendor master file, or the vendor banking or remittance address updated in the vendor master file to then trigger that approval workflow. What if you could stop it at step one, right, when they first get that request? And this can be done by the user. And there's one thing that I do recommend that you do, or you have the user do, right, at the end to prove that it was done. And I'll talk about that in just a moment. But first, I want to talk about how you can use AI tools in email to detect red flags. And so there are 2 different levels. First of all, let me just reiterate that I use Copilot for this because I'm a Microsoft person. But you could also use, I mentioned before, Gemini, ChatGPT, or another approved AI tool instead of a Copilot. But make sure it's an approved AI tool. And if you already have access to Copilot because your organization has given you that, great. If you're not already doing this, I would make sure you put this into practice. And so what I'm talking about is really two different levels. One is where you can just take that one email, or a user can, your vendor team member can take an email and either drop it or copy and paste the email text into the AI tool. Now, I use Copilot, and so I just drug a um, email from Outlook into Copilot and dropped it in there. And what I did was I included a prompt to tell it to review the email for fraud, phishing, business email compromise, vendor impersonation, payment red flags, and social engineering tactics. Then I said, identify the requested action, list the red flags, assign a risk level, and tell me what independent verification step I should take before replying or acting. Now, where are they getting the requirements from? That may come from the web, that could come from your documents, your processes, your desktop procedure. And so now the AI tool will then review that email, that second set of eyes. Now, you can tweak the prompts as you like, uh, but that alone can help users, your team members, spot things that they may miss when they have that email burnout, or when they're just busy, pressured, or distracted. Think about year end, think about month end, think about any time, which is a lot of most of the time of the year in AP, when you are busy, or in the vendor team when they're busy and have to get vendors set up because right they need a last minute payment. Even that vendor can still be legitimate, and those things happen all the time. And so it's great to have that second set of eyes in that artificial intelligence or AI tool. So that's one way that you can use it. The second way to use an AI tool is to create an agentic agent. And the difference between an AI agent and just regular AI, as what I explained in the first example, is the a regular AI prompt, which is what that was. It really just answers a question one time. But an agentic AI can follow a repeatable process. So you can tell it to read or summarize the email, compare it to a red flag checklist, right? Identify the requested action, score the risk level, recommend a verification step, draft a safe response, right? Remind the user not to use the contact information provided in the suspicious email. So you can include whatever steps that you think will prevent a fraudulent email from moving right from the email stage to actually getting processed. And this may be something, right, that you develop as a team, you develop as a leader, or maybe it's given to you because it was developed by leadership or, cyber professionals to identify those red flags for fraud. And then that agent will be used on subsequent emails so that you do not have to include or write that individual prompt every time. The agent will already have the steps included. And so that's where I think the real value is if you have everyone using right? The same AI agent process. Now, maybe if you have, because I know when I was a practitioner, I don't talk about it often, but I used to have a team of 17. All we did was vendor setup and maintenance. We processed about 2,000 requests per month. We maintained 140,000 vendors across 7 different ERPs. And I wish I could tell you how many emails came in on a daily, monthly, whatever basis. You can imagine that was probably a lot. And so to uh, develop an agentic AI that can be used by all the team members that were assigned to like a specific type of vendor or specific accounting system or ERP, right? Those inquiries that will come in. Because I will tell you, we had shared email boxes, but I split them. So I split, international emails from or international vendors from US vendors because they require different steps, different verification. And so the folks that I assigned to those international vendors were separate. And so I gave them a separate email inbox or a separate shared email inbox. And so I could see where I would create a separate agentic AI for that because it may have additional verification steps versus, right, a US vendor. And so, again, though, this can be something that can be developed and used applicably by each team member so that they can catch fraud that they didn't see. And it's getting harder to see some of these red flags in emails because the fraudsters, they're using AI to make those emails appear that much more legitimate. They're also using other tricks to make sure that, again, the emails look legitimate. Emails, the email domains, right? They've got all kind of tricks up their sleeves. If you've seen any of my training or my free webinars, it's just too much to get into with this podcast. But they do a lot of tricks to make sure that the emails look legitimate. And so this is another layer that you can put into place. And the thing that I talked about earlier, I kind of teased about it, that it could find this one new fraud trend that the fraudsters are doing before sending that email request to change banking or to change a remittance address is they are sending a request to update contact information. Why? Because they know you're making that confirmation call. Doesn't mean you shouldn't make the confirmation call, but it does mean that you need to put additional layers of controls in place. And so this can be one of those, right? And so what the AI or agentic AI can be taught to do is to have them scan for that same vendor email or address or vendor information to see if a contact information change request was received via email. And why would they do that? Because they know we're making that confirmation call. It doesn't mean you shouldn't make it, just means you need to put on an extra layer of protection. But they know we're making that confirmation call. And so they are sending a request ahead of the request to change the remittance information, to change the contact information. So when you contact them, when you make that confirmation call, you will end up contacting the fraudster. And so the agentic AI can be programmed as a repeatable step to look for a request, similar request from that vendor to change contact information. And if it's found, you know what? That might just be enough of a red flag that if it will mean that it will not be processed. Now, I created a training session called Build a Copilot Agent for Outlook to spot vendor bank change red flags. It's coming up on Tuesday, May 26, 2026. And if you're listening to this after then, there will definitely be a recording that you can also enroll in if you are interested. It is 2 hours, it's from 2 to 4 p.m. But the expectation is that after the session, you'll understand how to build and implement it. You'll use the Microsoft Copilot agent to spot red flags, and you'll use it to stay aligned with evolving fraudster email tactics. And so I'm going to put a link to that in the show notes as well. And then I just want to end this with and it's probably, self-explanatory, but I do want to end this with what I see as 4 benefits of using AI in email, really to help prevent payment fraud or business email compromise that leads to payment fraud. So, first of all, it can detect impersonation and abnormal behavior when especially now when the fraudsters can be in the vendor's email and there is no right spoofed email address. It's coming from the fraudster or from the vendor's actual email. So AI can really analyze sender behavior, writing style, communication patterns, right, to spot emails that impersonate the vendors, maybe even your executives. And I know that fraudsters have access to AI, right, that can, write in their style. But, there's may still be some anomalies because that's just one email. When you use agentic AI and you scan, right, the email mailbox, they may, they've got multiple emails from that person. And so what the fraudsters used and produced still may be different. So that's one. Two, it identifies social engineering language, right, in real time. And so the urgency, the payment pressure, unusual requests, right, that those things that are common in BEC scams, that can be found with this agentic AI. Also, it adapts to new and evolving BEC tactics because we know the fraudsters are always evolving, and this AI continues to learn from threats and anomalies, right? Allowing detection of new threats that your team might not even be aware of. And then lastly, number 4, because it reduces the reliance on human judgment alone. And we all need that because no one, not even you, can be 100% of the time to find every fraudulent email. So this is another layer of protection. So that is all I had for you today. Thanks, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the 386th episode of the Putting the AP in Happy podcast, where accounts payable teams are empowered to protect the vendor master file from fraud. Don't forget to check the show notes for the links mentioned in the podcast. And if you enjoyed this episode, consider subscribing and writing a review of my podcast on the platform that you use to listen. Stay happy.